Let's mute. It's off.
So is it muted or not muted?
Good evening and welcome to our webinar where we'll be discussing the importance of beneficiaries and estate planning. We'll give everyone a few minutes to join the webinar and we'll commence shortly. Thanks for being patient. My name is Clive Joss and I'm a member account specialist with Brighter Super. As a member account specialist, we meet with members on a regular basis, and part of our discussion is the importance of understanding the options of nominating a beneficiary in your superannuation and pension account. It is one of our more popular topics at our seminars, and we hope by the end of this session, you'll have gained a further understanding of beneficiaries and estate planning. I recognize that this is a heavy subject for your evening viewing, but hope you stay with me as we talk through what can be a complex subject. Firstly, Brighter Super acknowledges the traditional owners on the lands of which we're meeting and pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. We acknowledge and celebrate the continuation of a living culture has a unique role in this region. It is important to understand that the information and examples contained in the presentation are general in nature and have been prepared without taking into account your individual objectives, financial situation, or needs. It is important when making decisions about your super options that you obtain the relevant product disclosure statement and target market determination and consider your own personal circumstances. You can access these documents and the Financial Services Guide from the Brighter Super website. Today's presentation will run for approximately 30 minutes. Many of you have submitted questions already, which we have tried to incorporate into the presentation. You can also post questions in the Q&A feature during our presentation today, which we'll aim to answer directly. We've got Jack Sheriff standing by as a moderator today. Jack has been with the fund for 5 years and is also regularly in the fields providing super health checks to members in regions throughout Queensland. Jack.
Good evening. Good evening, everyone. I'm looking forward to answering any questions you have. Just a reminder to send these through the Q&A feature on your screen at any point during the presentation. Thank you.
Excellent. We should have time for questions at the end, and we'll try to answer as many as possible. We'll also be running some poll questions throughout today's presentations. When the questions pop up on your screen, just click an answer that is appropriate to you. Don't worry about taking too many notes. We will send you out this recording in coming days. Before we move on to our main subject, I'd like to take the opportunity to briefly explain who we are. The merger between LGI Super and Energy Super, plus the acquisition of SBSL, has enabled us to increase our size and scale, yet we remain committed to investing in the personalised member services that you know and enjoy. We manage over 250,000 member accounts and over $30 billion in funds under management. Our My Super option was ranked in the top 5 funds in the peer super ratings for financial year 2023. Now, let's talk beneficiaries and estate planning. An estate plan aims to preserve the maximum amount of wealth possible for the intended beneficiaries and flexibility for the individual prior to death. This allows you to be in control of how you'd like your estate distributed to look after your loved ones. An estate plan helps you protect your family and loved ones, optimize tax upon transfer of assets in a legal and logical manner, and ensure your wishes are followed. Remember that your estate typically consists of everything you own, which is your assets, and everything you owe, known as your liabilities. Superannuation can be one of those assets. It doesn't automatically form part of your estate because super is held within a trust managed by the trustee of your super fund. A death benefit is generally the amount of money in your super account plus any insurance you may have at the time of your death. Whether it's a little or a lot, it could go a long way in supporting your dependents after you've gone. If you're already provided your nomination to Brighter Super, this may expedite the process, which provides peace of mind for where your superannuation benefits will be paid. Again, it's important to note that a superannuation death benefit does not form part of a member's estate and is not necessarily paid as part of the will. If there's no valid binding death benefit nomination, then Brighter Super will determine the distribution of the benefit, subject to the requirements of our trustees, governing rules, and legislative requirements. In allocating a superannuation death benefit among members' dependents, consideration is given to those dependents who might have expected to continue to receive financial support from the member. When no beneficiary nomination is listed, the benefit is generally paid to the deceased member's personal legal representative, also called the executor or administrator of the estate. It can take up to 3 times longer to pay out a death benefit if you do not have a binding death benefit nomination in place. You can instruct Brighter Super who to pay your death benefit to by making either a non-binding nomination, also known as a preferred nomination, or a binding death benefit nomination. Let's look at this in further detail. When you first open your account, you are given the option to nominate your beneficiaries. You can review your current nomination by logging into your member online. There is a tab headed Beneficiaries, which will provide you with your current nomination. It's important to review this to ensure it is up to date and valid. It is especially important to review if you have had a change in personal circumstances, for example, marriage, divorce, at-risk children, and so on. Your current beneficiary nomination will also be detailed in your annual statement each year. Let's look at the 2 types of nominations for your accumulation account, which include defined contribution and defined benefit accounts. Preferred beneficiary nomination. A preferred beneficiary nomination helps guide us when we are deciding who to pay your benefits to. With a preferred beneficiary nomination, Brighter Super is not legally required to follow your instructions. This is because the rules set out in the trust deed obligate us to identify all dependents before determining who to pay the benefit to. Binding death benefit nomination. This is a legal document which binds the trustee to pay your benefits to whoever you have nominated, as long as this is valid nomination in accordance with superannuation legislation and our trust deed. If you haven't made a binding nomination in the event of your death, we are required by law to determine how our best to distribute your money. We do this by following the rules set out in the superannuation legislation. For anyone with complex family arrangements, the outcome could be very different from what you had in mind. Making a binding nomination puts you in control. If you have more than one beneficiary, you can decide what percentage of that benefit each would receive. For example, your partner could receive 50% and your 2 children could receive 25% each. A binding death benefit nomination gives you certainty over where your money will go. It may be particularly useful, as mentioned, if you have more complex family situation, such as an ex-partner or children of current and former relationships. A binding death benefit nomination is a legally binding document that obligates Brighter Super to pay your benefits to your nominated beneficiary or beneficiaries, provided the nomination is valid at the time of your death. All nominations could carry risk. If your situation is complex, you may seek estate planning advice. Shortly, we will discuss the difference between a binding death benefit nomination and a binding non-lapsing nomination. And for members who hold a pension account, we'll cover reversionary nominations. Now, onto our first poll question for today. Have you nominated a beneficiary? Yes or no? Gosh, thanks for joining in. Certainly seeing the numbers coming in. And it's refreshing to see how many people have nominated, but always a concern that there are a number of people that have not gone through the nomination process. You may have noticed I've mentioned a few times that your nomination must be valid at the time of your death. Let's have a look at who you can nominate as a beneficiary. Superannuation legislation dictates who can receive all or part of a superannuation death benefit: the member's dependents and the member's legal personal representative, LPR. A legal personal representative, or LPR, is the executor named in your will or the administrator of your estate. If you nominate an LPR to receive your super benefits, then your LPR will distribute the super benefits according to your will. Under superannuation law, a dependent may include a spouse, whether legal or de facto, a child, including an adopted child, an ex-nuptial child, a stepchild, and anyone who fits the definition of a child under the Family Law Act of 1975. Any person who has had an interdependency relationship with a deceased member, and any person who is financially dependent, whether wholly or partly, on the deceased member. In the instance of a preferred nomination, anyone who is being financially supported just before the member died would be given priority. I think it is fairly clear that what the definition is for a spouse or child. Let's delve a little deeper into who's considered a financial dependent and what is the definition of an interdependent relationship. Financial dependence. A financial dependent is someone who was wholly or partially financially dependent on the member at the time of the death. This may include being reliant on the deceased for the payments of bills, rent, or shared financial commitments, such as a mortgage. Documents proving the financial dependency would need to be provided to Brighter Super at time of claim. Interdependent relationships are when two people are in an interdependency relationship if they have a close personal relationship and they live together and one or each of them provides the other with financial support, and one or each of them provides the other with domestic support and personal care. In order to satisfy the criteria for interdependency, all 4 criteria must be met. So what happens if you don't nominate a beneficiary? If you don't nominate a beneficiary, then we will pay your death benefit according to the rules set out in the fund trust deed and Australian government legislation. This means we look for dependents and determine how best to distribute your benefit. Death benefits are tax-free if paid to a tax dependent. This includes a spouse, married or de facto, a child under the age of 18 years, including stepchildren, adopted children, ex-nuptial children, or anyone who fits the definition of a child under the Family Law Act of 1975. Anyone who is financially dependent on you at the time of your death, a person who you shared an interdependent relationship with. Let's go into how the benefits are taxed in more detail on the following slide. In most people's circumstances, there are 2 taxable components, a tax-free component and a taxable component. The tax-free component are funds contributed after tax as a non-concessional amount. These contributions aren't taxed on the way into super as they have come from a previously taxed source. An example is if you received an inheritance or sale of an asset and put the money into super. The tax component generally holds the greater portion of your super balance. These are the contributions made by your employer, salary sacrifice and personal deductible contributions plus earnings. These monies have been taxed concessionally at 15% on the way into super. If the benefit is paid to somebody who is not considered a dependent, the taxable portion of the benefit is taxed at 15% plus Medicare levy. The untaxed component is taxed at 30% plus Medicare levy. Generally, it would be unusual for members to have an untaxed component in their super account. This tax refers to funds that usually wouldn't have been taxed based on certain legislation at the time and required to be taxed upon death or upon withdrawal. The taxed and untaxed components are calculated at the time of the payment. Generally, everyone has taxable components in their super. The amount in each component will determine how this could be taxed when paying out the death benefit payment to a non-tax dependent. Let's give you a simple example. This case study illustrates a potential tax payable for a non-tax dependent. On passing, Jamie has a total balance of $500,000 and wanted to leave this to their adult child. This is made up of the tax component of $400,000, which consists of the contributions their employer made during their life plus earnings. The potential tax payable is 17%, which equals $68,000. This will be deducted and paid to the ATO prior to Jamie's adult child receiving the death benefit. The other $100,000 is tax-free and would pass in its entirety to their child. The total Jamie's child would receive after tax is $432,000. Now you can find your individual taxable components in your annual statement or on Member Online through the Benefit Quote tab. If you're concerned about your tax position, there are potential strategies for reducing tax on death that our financial advice team can discuss with you. I would suggest seeking advice for your own personal circumstances if you feel that these strategies may be of benefit to you. Later in the presentation, we will share how to contact them. Now, onto our second poll question. When did you last check your beneficiary nomination? Within the last 3 years? Within the last 3 to 5 years? 5+ years? or never. Okay, excellent. That's looking good. So most of you are on top of that as well, but there's still a few out there that haven't looked at it more recently or never. There are different types of death benefit nominations. Let's look at them each in detail. The first one to discuss is the preferred or non-binding nomination. This can be completed via Member Online, and there's no time period or expiry. This nomination can be updated at any time through the member portal. It is important to remember that this is an expression of your wishes, but is not binding, and Brighter Super is legally required to identify all of your dependents and pay your benefit according to the rules set out in the LGIA Super Trust Deed. The next way is to complete a binding nomination. This can either be lapsing or non-lapsing. Binding lapsing will be valid for 3 years from the date the form is signed. You'll need to complete a new nomination every 3 years or earlier if your situation changes. We will advise you when it is due to expire, but you will need to ensure you complete a new nomination or your nomination will lapse. Non-lapsing, as the name suggests, will be valid from the date the form is signed and remain in place until revoked or amended. The nomination does not expire. However, its validity will be assessed at the time of your death. You can replace or cancel your nomination for either the lapsing or non-lapsing at any time. Your form must be witnessed by 2 people over the age of 18 who are not nominated as beneficiaries. Everyone must sign and date the form on the same day. The form can have no errors. Do not cross out and initial any errors, as the nomination form will be rejected. If you make a mistake, simply print a new form and start again. You can post or email the form to us for actioning. Another important note is if you are nominating more than one beneficiary, then the total of all the shares allocated to each beneficiary must equal 100%. Remember to update your nomination whenever your situation changes. The final option is a reversionary nomination. This only applies to members with a pension account. A reversionary beneficiary nomination allows you to have your pension continue to be paid as a pension to your beneficiary, generally your spouse, upon your death. You are also able to nominate a preferred or binding death benefit nomination instead of a reversionary beneficiary. Your nomination is legally binding and does not lapse. We recommend reviewing your reversionary nomination regularly to ensure that it is still appropriate for your situation. Who can you nominate as a reversionary beneficiary is outlined on the form. The beneficiary is generally your spouse. There is an option for children. However, this is age, financial, or disability dependent. And please refer to the form for all the relevant options. You can also refer to Brighter Super Pension Product Disclosure Statement for further guidance. There may be social security or tax implications for your potential beneficiaries when making a reversionary nomination. Our financial advisors may be able to help you decide how best to deal with your superannuation. Apart from seeking financial advice, we would also suggest that you seek independent estate planning advice. Loan Chow from YHC Lawyers regularly presents at our face-to-face seminars where she speaks about the importance of wills and estate planning and enduring powers of attorney. YHC Lawyers details are on the screen, and if you are interested in speaking about your situation, you can scan the QR code for further contact information. As a boutique fund, you also have the option to book in for a 30-minute super health check at no additional cost. The super health check covers a variety of areas and importantly reviews your beneficiary nomination. If you would like to book now, there is a QR code on screen. You will also receive a link to book a super health check in the coming days, alongside today's webinar recording. We offer a range of personal advice options suited to individual members' needs. If you're looking for specific information about making contributions or investment strategies, our intra-fund advice team can help. Book in an over-the-phone meeting with a financial advisor at no additional cost. We also offer both a scaled and comprehensive personal advice service. This service takes a complete view of your financial situation to tailor advice to suit your individual needs and is face-to-face meeting with one of our advice team in Brisbane or any of the various regions in Queensland. Appointments may also be arranged via digital channels. The cost will depend on the complexity of the advice, and this cost may be deducted from your Brighter Super accumulation account. Two of the most common questions members ask as they approach retirement are, how much super do I need to retire? And do I have enough super? A retirement health check with one of our financial advisors will help you answer these questions. It's never too early to start planning for retirement, so talk to us to find out how we can help. Webinars like this one are a great way to get specific information on a variety of topics. This is not the only webinar that we have or will be holding. Go to our website or scan the QR code on the screen to find out what is coming up. Make sure you check this page regularly, as we are often adding new dates and topics. If you register for any webinars, regardless if you attend, you will receive a copy of the recording the day following the webinar. I've covered a lot of ground today. You can also visit the resources tab and then forms and info sheets on our website for more information on the different forms we have discussed today and handy information sheets. We've tried to answer questions throughout the webinar tonight, but I'll invite Jack to come on screen to answer any questions we couldn't get to in the Q&A chat. During the Q&A, we will show the Super Health Check slide again to give you all additional time should you wish to book in an appointment.
Thank you, Clive, for your presentation. Before we start the Q&A, I just wanted to give another general advice warning. It's important to understand that, similar to the webinar itself, the information and examples we give in this Q&A session are general in nature and have been prepared without taking into account your individual objectives, financial situation, or needs. Now, we have one question submitted I would like to address from Colin. You have asked, my beneficiary and I are not currently resident in Australia. How does this impact my beneficiary in the event of my death? Colin, thank you for your question. Generally speaking, this would not necessarily affect the beneficiary you have chosen. The payment would be transferred into an Australian bank account. We would contact the beneficiary to let them know the step-by-step process. And from there, the beneficiary may need to take the extra steps to get that benefit provided to the country that they reside in. Now, furthermore, I do want to say that that is a general in nature answer for that question, as the circumstances may vary depending on who you've nominated outside of the country. So if you could please book in for a super health check to speak to a specialist, just so we can discuss further about your particular situation, then that would be greatly appreciated. You can nominate the super health check to be completed by video, so Zoom or Teams, if you do not have an Australian number for us to contact. So thank you for understanding. Other than that, that's all of the questions we have completed today. Most of the pre-submitted questions were answered through the content Clive provided today. But if there is anything else, again, that you would like to discuss further in detail, please book in for a Super Health check to chat with one of our specialists. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks, Jack, for answering that. I really appreciate the support. Thanks again to you all for taking time to come along and attend our webinar. Not getting off too easy. One last poll question before we bring things to a close. Overall, how satisfied were you with today's webinar? Very satisfied, satisfied, dissatisfied, very dissatisfied, neither satisfied or dissatisfied. Thanks again for attending. Appreciate your answers and joining us and attending this evening's webinar. And we certainly hope to speak with you soon.